The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the dimly lit hospital room where a man lay motionless on the hospital bed. His name was Officer Daniel Hayes, a decorated K-9 officer known for his bravery and dedication. Machines beeped in rhythmic tones, monitoring his fragile state. The doctors had told his family and colleagues that he had only a few hours left. Outside the room, a German shepherd named Shadow paced anxiously. Shadow was more than just a police dog, he was Daniel's loyal partner, his protector, his best friend. For years they had worked together, taking down criminals, rescuing the lost, and building an unbreakable bond. But now everything was changing. Shadow whimpered as he watched the hospital staff come and go. He didn't understand why Daniel wouldn't wake up, why he couldn't nudge him and make him stand like he always did after a long night on patrol. The other officers had brought Shadow here to say goodbye, but something in his instincts told him that goodbye wasn't the right word. A nurse walked past him, pausing to kneel down and gently scratch behind his ears. "Poor boy," she whispered. "He's been waiting all night." Inside the room, Daniel's family sat in silence, their faces pale from exhaustion and grief. His sister Emily held his cold hand, whispering words of love and memories of their childhood. His father, a retired officer himself, sat with his head bowed, his strong hands clenched into fists. The doctor, a tall man with silver-rimmed glasses, approached the family with a solemn expression. "It's time," he said softly. "We will be disconnecting the life support." The words sent a shiver through the room. Emily gasped, shaking her head in protest, while Daniel's father closed his eyes, fighting back tears. The officers standing in the doorway looked down, their badges reflecting the fluorescent light. "Can Shadow say goodbye first?" one of the officers asked. The doctor hesitated before nodding. "Of course." The door opened, and Shadow rushed in, his claws clicking against the cold tiles. His eyes locked onto Daniel, his ears perked up, and his nose twitched as he sniffed the air. Something was wrong. Shadow jumped onto the bed, ignoring the gentle protests from the nurses. He nuzzled Daniel's face, licked his hand, and whimpered desperately. His tail, usually high with confidence, was tucked between his legs. He whimpered, pawing at Daniel's chest as if urging him to wake up. Then suddenly, Shadow froze. His ears twitched, and his body stiffened. He sniffed Daniel's breath, then moved his nose to his neck, inhaling deeply. Something was off. Shadow growled low in his throat, his fur bristling. "What's wrong, boy?" one of the officers asked. Shadow turned his head sharply toward the doctor, his deep brown eyes locking onto the man's face. He growled again, this time louder. The sound sent a chill through the room. The doctor stepped back, looking surprised. "What's the matter with him?" But Shadow wasn't backing down. His instincts, honed from years of police work, screamed at him that something wasn't right. He barked loudly, his body positioned protectively over Daniel. "Shadow, calm down," Emily said, trying to soothe him. But Shadow wouldn't calm down. His nose twitched again, and he let out another bark, his eyes flicking from Daniel to the doctor. One of the officers, a man named Sergeant Carter, stepped forward. "Hold on," he said, glancing at the machines. "Is Daniel really?" He hesitated, then turned to the nurse. "Check his vitals again." The nurse looked uncertain but did as she was told. She pressed the stethoscope to Daniel's chest and suddenly gasped. "He's breathing on his own," she whispered. The room fell silent. The doctor frowned, stepping forward, but Shadow growled again, standing between him and Daniel. Sergeant Carter's eyes narrowed. "Check again." The nurse quickly adjusted the monitors. "His heart rate is stabilizing," she said. Emily let out a small cry. "He's alive." The doctor muttered, his face turning pale. "He shouldn't be." But Shadow wasn't done yet. He sniffed the 4 bag attached to Daniel's arm and let out another warning growl. He pawed at it, then barked loudly. Sergeant Carter stepped closer and examined the 4. His face darkened. "What's in this bag?" he demanded. The nurse looked at the label and gasped. "This isn't his medication." The air in the room turned ice cold. Sergeant Carter turned sharply to the doctor. "Explain this." The doctor opened his mouth but hesitated. Sweat beaded on his forehead. It must have been a mix-up. But Shadow wasn't convinced. He barked again, louder this time, his teeth bared. Sergeant Carter grabbed the 4 bag and handed it to another officer. Get this tested now. Within minutes, the results confirmed what Shadow had suspected. Daniel had been given the wrong medication, a fatal dose of a drug that would have shut down his system completely. It wasn't a mistake. It was attempted murder. The doctor tried to slip out of the room, but Shadow lunged, blocking his path. He barked ferociously, his instincts screaming that this man was a threat. The officers acted fast, grabbing the doctor before he could flee. You have the right to remain silent, Sergeant Carter said coldly as he handcuffed him. And I strongly suggest you use it. The doctor's face twisted in fear as he was led away. Shadow, satisfied that the threat was gone, turned back to Daniel. He licked his face gently, his tail wagging just slightly. Daniel's eyes fluttered open. The room erupted into gasps. Emily sobbed with relief. His father let out a shaky breath. The officers murmured in disbelief. Daniel, weak but alive, reached out and placed his hand on Shadow's head. Good boy, he whispered. Shadow let out a soft whimper and rested his head on Daniel's chest, listening to the heartbeat he had just saved. He had come to say goodbye. Instead, he had saved his best friend's life. The moral of the story: loyalty and instinct should never be underestimated. True friends, whether human or animal, have a way of sensing danger, even when others don't. Trust, love, and the unbreakable bond between a dog and its owner can sometimes be the difference between life and death. It was a quiet morning, the sun just beginning to rise as the small town of Brooksville woke up to the usual sounds of birds chirping and people going about their daily routines. But today was different. Today, everyone in the town would remember the day when an animal's loyalty saved a life that had almost been lost due to a terrible mistake. The news of Daniel's survival spread quickly throughout Brooksville. The hospital staff, still in shock over what had happened, were astounded by the turn of events. They had never witnessed anything like it before. A dog, a police dog no less, had saved the life of his partner. And it wasn't just any dog. Shadow was no ordinary canine. He was the embodiment of everything a police dog should be: intelligent, brave, loyal, and unyielding in his dedication to his partner. Shadow had been with Daniel for years, and their bond was undeniable. They were a team, working together to serve and protect the community. Shadow had been there during countless raids, high-speed chases, and dangerous situations. The two of them had saved each other's lives more times than either of them could count. But now, Shadow had saved Daniel's life in a way that no one could have ever imagined. After the shocking events in the hospital room, Daniel's condition continued to improve. The doctors were baffled. They had written him off as lost, but now he was defying the odds. His recovery was nothing short of miraculous. It was clear that Shadow's intervention had made all the difference. If it hadn't been for Shadow's instincts and his protective nature, Daniel might not have lived to see another day. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's strength gradually returned. He was still weak, but he was alive, and that was all that mattered. His family, friends, and fellow officers rallied around him, offering their support as he recovered. Emily, Daniel's sister, was especially relieved to see him awake and breathing, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to the story. The police investigation into the doctor's actions was swift. The authorities had no tolerance for anyone who would deliberately harm someone under their care. It was soon discovered that the doctor, who had been working at the hospital for several years, had a dark secret. He had been involved in several previous cases of medical malpractice, but nothing had ever come to light until now. Shadow's actions had forced the truth into the open, and the doctor was arrested and charged with attempted murder. As the investigation progressed, the town of Brooksville began to rally around Shadow. The loyal police dog had become a local hero, and his story was shared across the country. People marveled at how a dog's instincts and unwavering loyalty had led to the discovery of a crime and the saving of a life. Shadow's name became synonymous with courage, loyalty, and love. The officers in Brooksville had always known what Shadow was capable of. They had witnessed his bravery on countless occasions, and they had always trusted his instincts. But now, everyone else knew too. Shadow was no longer just a police dog. He was a symbol of the bond between humans and animals, a bond that went beyond simple companionship. It was a bond of trust, protection, and love. As Daniel recovered, he spent more time with Shadow, grateful for the second chance at life that his loyal partner had given him. He had always considered Shadow to be more than just a working dog. Shadow was his best friend. And now, more than ever, Daniel knew just how deep that bond ran. Shadow had saved his life, and in return, Daniel was determined to do whatever it took to make sure Shadow had the best life possible. The two of them spent their days together, taking long walks in the park and visiting the local police station where Daniel had worked for so many years. Shadow was always by his side, his head held high, his tail wagging happily. The bond between them had only grown stronger, and it was clear to everyone who saw them together that they were inseparable. But the story didn't end there. Shadow's actions had caught the attention of people far beyond Brooksville. News outlets across the country picked up the story, and soon, Shadow was receiving accolades and recognition for his bravery. The local animal shelter even held a special ceremony in his honor, presenting him with a medal for his heroism. It was a moment that Shadow would never fully understand, but he was happy just to be by Daniel's side, as always. As the months passed, life in Brooksville slowly returned to normal. The shock of the events at the hospital faded, but the memory of Shadow's loyalty and bravery remained in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the incredible turn of events. Shadow's story had touched the lives of so many people, and it served as a reminder of the power of love and loyalty, qualities that animals like Shadow had in abundance. One day, as Daniel sat on the porch of his house, Shadow by his side, he reflected on everything that had happened. He thought about the dark days when he had been lying unconscious in that hospital bed, surrounded by machines and a feeling of finality. He thought about Shadow, pacing outside the room, sensing that something wasn't right. And then he thought about the moment when Shadow had saved his life. Daniel smiled as he looked down at Shadow, who was lying contentedly at his feet, his eyes soft with affection. "Good boy," Daniel whispered, rubbing the dog's ears. Shadow's tail thumped against the ground in response, his eyes bright with happiness. It was then that Daniel realized something important. The bond between him and Shadow was unbreakable. It wasn't just a partnership formed through years of working together. It was something deeper, a bond built on trust, respect, and love. Shadow had risked everything to protect him, and in doing so, had proven that the bond between a man and his dog was truly something special. And as the sun set over Brooksville, casting a warm golden glow over the town, Daniel knew that he would never take Shadow's loyalty for granted. He would never forget the day when his best friend had saved his life. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was a hero who had proven that loyalty, instinct, and love could make all the difference in the world. The story of Daniel and Shadow continued to inspire people across the country. People from all walks of life, from animal lovers to law enforcement officers, were moved by the story of a dog's loyalty and how it had saved the life of his human partner. Shadow's actions had changed the way people thought about the bond between humans and animals. It wasn't just about companionship, it was about an unspoken understanding, a deep connection that transcended words. Shadow had become a symbol of what true loyalty meant, and his actions were a reminder that sometimes, the most extraordinary acts of heroism come from the most unexpected places. The bond between Daniel and Shadow was stronger than ever. They spent every day together, and Daniel's recovery continued at a steady pace. The officers in the department were all amazed by the dog's behavior. They had seen firsthand the way Shadow had protected Daniel and how his instincts had led him to uncover the truth. For many of them, it was a reminder of the power of loyalty, not just in animals, but in all relationships. In the weeks following the doctor's arrest, the town of Brooksville held a ceremony to honor Shadow's bravery. The local police department organized the event, inviting the families, friends, and colleagues who had been a part of Daniel's life to come together to celebrate the dog's heroism. The event was held in the town square, where a large crowd gathered to show their support for Shadow and Daniel. People lined up to shake hands with Daniel, and many took the opportunity to thank him for his service, but all eyes were on Shadow, the true hero of the day. Shadow stood proudly at Daniel's side as the mayor of Brooksville took to the podium. "Today, we honor not just a man, but a dog," the mayor began, his voice strong and steady. "A dog who showed us the true meaning of loyalty, courage, and love. Shadow, you saved a life. You saved Officer Daniel Hayes. And for that, we are all eternally grateful." The crowd erupted in applause, and Shadow wagged his tail, standing tall at Daniel's side. He didn't understand the words, but he knew that they were for him. And in that moment, he felt the love and gratitude of everyone around him. It was a moment of recognition that Shadow would never forget, and it was a testament to the power of the bond between a dog and his owner. As the ceremony continued, Daniel stood beside Shadow, his hand resting gently on the dog's head. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything Shadow had done for him. The dog had saved his life, but more than that, Shadow had given him something even more precious, the gift of time. Time to be with his family, time to continue his work, and time to cherish every moment with his loyal companion. The two of them had been through so much together, and now, as they stood there in front of the crowd, Daniel knew that their bond was unbreakable. The ceremony ended with Shadow receiving a special Medal of Honor, which was presented to him by the police chief. The chief, with a proud smile on his face, placed the medal around Shadow's neck. "For your bravery, for your loyalty, for your unwavering dedication to your partner," the chief said, his voice full of emotion. "You are a true hero, Shadow." The crowd erupted into applause once again, and Daniel couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for his best friend. Shadow had always been more than just a dog, he had always been a protector, a partner, and now, he was a hero. The bond between them had been tested in ways that no one could have ever imagined, but it had only grown stronger in the face of adversity. They were a team, and nothing could break that bond. As the event came to a close, Daniel and Shadow walked back to their car, their heads held high. Daniel's heart swelled with pride as he looked at his loyal companion. "Good boy, Shadow," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. Shadow turned to him, his eyes bright with affection, and nuzzled Daniel's hand. It was a simple gesture, but to Daniel, it meant everything. In that moment, he knew that Shadow had saved not just his life, but his heart as well. Back at home, Daniel spent more time with Shadow than ever before. They took long walks together, enjoyed lazy afternoons in the sun, and spent quiet evenings watching the world go by. The days of uncertainty were behind them, and now, they could just enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Daniel often thought about how close he had come to losing everything, and how much he owed to Shadow. It wasn't just about the dog's actions in the hospital room, it was about everything that Shadow had done for him over the years, the companionship, the protection, and the unconditional love. Shadow had been there through thick and thin, and Daniel knew that he would never take that for granted again. One afternoon, as they were walking through the park, Daniel stopped to sit on a bench and watch Shadow as he ran around, chasing a stick. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the park, and Daniel felt a sense of peace wash over him. Shadow trotted over to him, the stick in his mouth, and dropped it at his feet. Daniel laughed softly and threw the stick, watching as Shadow eagerly ran after it. It was moments like these that Daniel cherished, the most simple, everyday moments with his best friend. As the days went on, Shadow's fame continued to grow. He appeared on national news, was interviewed by reporters, and even received an invitation to appear on a popular talk show. While all the attention was flattering, Shadow remained humble, always by Daniel's side, his tail wagging and his eyes full of love. He didn't care about the accolades or the recognition. All that mattered to him was being there for Daniel, the one person who had always been there for him. In the end, Shadow's story became a symbol of something greater, a symbol of the power of loyalty, of friendship, and of the unbreakable bond between a dog and his owner. It reminded people that animals are not just pets, but partners, protectors, and family. Shadow had shown the world that sometimes, the most unexpected heroes come in the form of four-legged companions, and that loyalty and love are the greatest gifts we can give each other.